Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today is Monday, the 25th of May, 2026. Let's get right to it. Look, today is going to be another really great show. We've got a list of incredible guests today, as usual. Beginning with Alistair Harold, co-founder and CEO at Grappler.io. He's going to join us to talk about how insurance finance automation helps carriers, brokers, and partners eliminate spreadsheet-driven back-office friction and scale strategic growth. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Kenneth, regional marketing lead for a leading FinTech in Southeast Asia, to explore how AI-enabled FinTech product and engineering teams will help businesses scale payments, trust, and customer engagement across the region. Following that, we will welcome Skuler, CEO and co-founder at Intuition Robotics, I love robotics, to discuss how AI-powered companion robots will help healthcare and senior care organizations extend care, reduce isolation, and support older adults living independently at home. Next, we will talk to Kara Bombell, co-founder at Ethicai, to cover how Ethicai helps businesses turn AI governance from policy into operational trust. And then Michael Batuev, head of global payments at Wefi, will talk about how AI-enabled payments infrastructure can help businesses move money faster, reduce fraud, and operate across global financial rails with more intelligence and control. And finally, Jasper Knoben, Group CEO at Intrepid Asia, will join us to talk about how AI-powered omnichannel commerce operations will help brands scale faster, manage complexity, and make better decisions across Southeast Asia's fragmented digital markets. And before we get to all of our guests and a little bit of news, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity, with the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. That's a lot of businesses. It is the platform that makes more possible. Visit twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to some news. We want to start today with OpenAI is opening an applied AI lab in Singapore. So it's launching OpenAI in Singapore, a multi-year partnership. This is really important, actually, with Singapore's Ministry of Digital Development and Information, MDDI, backed by more than 300 million Singapore dollars and centered on its first applied AI lab outside the United States. The lab is meant to create over 200 Singapore-based technical roles, make Singapore a global hub for OpenAI's FDEs, so they're forward deployed engineers, and focus on practical AI deployment across public service, finance, and a full spectrum of business verticals in the region. So Singapore has always been super forward-looking. Look, I've been going to Singapore for over 30 years. It's deliberately positioning itself now. Well, it used to be manufacturing, then it moved into finance, and then it moved into, sort of thought-based industries. It's now deliberately positioning itself as Asia's AI deployment capital, not just testing, not where the frontier models are trained, but the place where frontier AI companies can prove that artificial intelligence can be safely, commercially, and institutionally deployed at scale. Look, Google DeepMind is also expanding its Singapore partnership around health, life, and a whole range of sort of industries. And Singapore is pairing that with national AI strategy, compute, investment, talent development, AI assurance, and even proposed AI nutrition labels, which is kind of an interesting thing to do. Like, is this AI going to be good for you? That would tell users what AI products are for, where they are weak, and where they should not be used. So let's kind of dig a little bit deeper into this. For those people that are not based in Southeast Asia, I think it's really important to explain, like, why would OpenAI and other foundation model companies choose Singapore as their Asian home? And the reason why really is pretty straightforward. Singapore is a deployment-first market, not just a sales market. It's not just a place where you put a sales team and they fan out into the rest of the region and do sales. OpenAI's Singapore lab is specifically about putting frontier AI into real institutions, with FDEs working directly with companies and agencies on the hardest problems, especially in public service, finance, healthcare, and digital infrastructure, which is places where Singapore actually really shines anyway. If you've been to Singapore, you know that financial services, healthcare, insurance, and insurtech are like very big industries there. And if you haven't been, you should know that for sure. And Singapore kind of has the right institutional density, if that makes sense. It has sophisticated banks, insurers, logistic firms, all the kind of verticals where you would want to test AI, particularly because that's where their multinational regional headquarters are. And it's in a small geography, so it's very easy to kind of get things organized. The AI deployment requires tight loops between the product teams, regulators, customers, data owners, all these other sort of interested parties. And in Singapore, that is literally like the best place to do this. Its proximity to the rest of Southeast Asia, its tightness in the sense that it's not such a super large place, but the density of important companies that are already there makes it important for OpenAI to be there as well. And as I already mentioned, like Google DeepMind is expanding there too. Singapore is trusted by both business and government buyers. And also, this is heavily supported by the Singapore government. Reuters described Singapore as kind of like a neutral ground for the AI sector, attractive to both US and Chinese startups, while also hosting US China ASEAN policy dialogue around AI. Remember, from a regulatory standpoint, Singapore is going to be the place that leads the region. And while the regulators in the other countries in Southeast Asia, whether it's Vietnam or Thailand or Indonesia or Malaysia or the Philippines, are all kind of very forward looking and they do communicate a lot with each other, a lot of this stuff is going to get driven out of Singapore. Japan's kind of its own sort of separate animal, although they do have a very close relationship with Singapore. But in Southeast Asia, Singapore is going to drive this. And that neutrality gives companies like OpenAI, Google DeepMind, NVIDIA, and others a regional base that is politically safer than many alternatives. You know, there's been this regional, it's not even that regional anymore, but there's been this regional competition between Singapore and Hong Kong for the last 30 years. And it's kind of ebbed and flowed for a while. There was Hong Kong was leading, then Singapore was leading. But for the last, I would say 10 to 15 years, at least in my mind, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm so close to Singapore, but the reality is that I feel like Singapore, because it's just larger and not directly connected to China, has been the winner, at least on the global scale. And also, Singapore has made AI a national economic strategy, not just like some side initiative that's going on along with all the other things, whether it's FinTech or health tech or insurtech, as I mentioned earlier. Singapore's national AI strategy was originally built and refreshed in 2023 and then updated again literally this month. We're still in May, right? I think we are. May 2026. And it's now being overseen by a national AI council chaired by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. And that tells foundation AI companies that deployment is backed by the top of the government. And I'm trying to remember, but we were ATP was actually at an event, AI Engineer in Singapore. I'm always going to get this wrong and Martin's going to laugh at me for this, but it was probably last week this time. I think I have it right. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs literally set up his own AI stack. I mean, that's how closely the government is related to this, right? And he set up his own computer, he set up his own AI stack, and he was giving a demo of what he had done there. That's how closely the government is related to this. They care about this and they care about it deeply. And Singapore is also a regional headquarters platform, if you don't know that already. Like I said before, it's small, but it's a gateway literally to ASEAN, India in a way, Australia for sure, and the broader Asia Pacific markets. NVIDIA has a partnership with Singtel, for example. It starts AI services in Singapore, and then it extends those future data center infrastructure into Indonesia and into Thailand as well. So what makes it uniquely attractive or unusually attractive as an AI testbed? Well, here's the other thing. It can test AI across multiple trust sectors. It's pushing AI into finance, healthcare, public service, education. There's still enough manufacturing in Singapore that it matters, and digital infrastructure for sure. And this is exactly the domains where AI has the highest economic value, but also the highest governance burden. You have to make sure that it's being used in a way that's proper, that's properly governed, that has the right guardrails around it. And OpenAI's lab and DeepMind's partnership both point directly at all of these sectors. Further, Singapore has a government that behaves like an early enterprise customer. They want to be the first guys and gals in. They really are. They're like raising their hands in the background going, we'll test it, let us do this. The state of Singapore doesn't merely regulate technology. It often pilots it. It often measures it. And it often operationalizes it before, not to keep it away from the institutions that are there, but just to give everybody else the confidence and to let everybody else trust the fact that, hey, if we're using it, you can use it as well. It's super valuable, I think, for these frontier model companies and AI companies because public sector deployment creates proof points, trust points, as far as I'm concerned, that then the private sector can look at and say, well, if the government's doing it, then we should be able to do it as well, as long as we set it up properly. And to be fair, even if the government makes a few mistakes along the way, even if there are some bumps in the road, some roadblocks, right? The government will figure it out. And by the time it filters into the private sector, everything should be fine. And that's a huge win, I think, for the companies that are there. Not just the local companies and financial institutions and stuff like that, but for the foreign companies that put their MNC headquarters in Singapore, as I mentioned before, it's a great trust point. The other thing as well is because the government is testing this and creating a trustable environment, you also have to understand that, again, a lot of US and European companies put their Asian headquarters there. They've already tested this stuff in their home market. So they can start deploying it as well in a way that and that's where their headquarters is. So even though they operate in Thailand or in the Philippines or in other Southeast Asian countries, they're already operational in Singapore. They test it there and then they fan that out to the rest of the market. That's just another big benefit that Singapore has. Singapore also has a controlled scale advantage. It's large enough to have like real banks, real hospitals. It has like one of the biggest deep water ports in the world. So even from a functional operational standpoint, you can see that that's going to work really well. And as I said before, the regulators in Singapore are just like highly engaged, but they're also very business focused. Like when people think about regulations and regulators, they're thinking about people that are getting in the way. My experience, frankly, in the whole region, but particularly in Singapore, is that the regulators in Singapore are not trying to get in the way. They're trying to create a pathway for companies, whether they're SMEs and SMBs or big institutions, to be able to use the newest and best technology to make their businesses more productive and more profitable. In a way, Singapore itself, it's almost like a whole country sandbox, if you'll allow me that. And Singapore as well is investing in talent, compute, and adoption at the same time. Singapore as a state committed more than $1 billion Singapore dollars over 5 years into AI compute, talent, and industry development, including up to Singapore $500 million for high performance. And a plan to triple AI practitioners to over 15,000 in 5 years. It is trying to turn AI from experimentation into enterprise-wise adoption. Singapore really wants to support 10,000 firms with AI adoption, especially in manufacturing, healthcare, and finance, which are probably the three biggest things that drive the economy in Singapore. That is the market OpenAI wants. They don't just want to go there and do demos for people. They want to do repeatable, institutional deployment. And finally, why does Singapore's governance model matter so much to whether it's OpenAI or Google DeepMind or NVIDIA or other enterprise buyers? And I think the reality here is that enterprise AI adoption is now limited less by model access and more by trust. This is the thing that I was mentioning before, right? Is that it's definitely limited by trust. And companies are asking whether AI systems are are reliable, audible, safe, compliant, and useful in real workflows. And in this case, Singapore is proving that that's actually the case. And that's actually kind of cool. It's explicitly building testing frameworks, accrediting AI evaluation organizations, and exploring nutrition labels, which I think is actually kind of interesting, to be fair, to define intended use, limitations, and misuse. AI Verify gives Singapore a governance product, not just a policy position. And that's actually kind of important. The AI Verify Foundation, a not-for-profit subsidiary of IMDA, develops AI testing tools, standards, best practices, and governance frameworks. Its mission is to create a neutral platform for collaboration on AI testing and governance. And that, I think, across the board, is going to be super helpful. Okay, let's bring in our first guest today, Alistair Harold, co-founder and CEO at Grappler.io. Alistair, how are you? I am super duper. You can hear me okay? Awesome. Let's get right to it. Look, we wanted to bring you in today because we wanted to talk about how insurance finance automation helps carriers, brokers, and partners eliminate spreadsheet-driven back office friction and scale strategic growth. But before we get to that, why don't you tell us a little bit about Grappler?
Yeah, absolutely. So Grappler is best of breed and the only platform built for insurance and accounting. So we help insurers, carriers, MGAs, and syndicates to know where their cash is, close their books fast, and grow their businesses without growing their finance team, fundamentally. So we sit over that distributed insurance industry that we all know well globally.
Awesome. So let's give a little bit of detail to people that may not be so familiar with the way the back office of insurance still runs, and maybe have not had a lot of conversations with insurtechs as well. But across the board, would you say, like, on average, does a lot of the insurance back office still run on like Excel spreadsheets or maybe Google Sheets as well? When the rest of the business, because the front part of the business seems to me to have to become like increasingly digital. Like, it's weird that you have parametric insurance, right, which is like straight through, and then the back office run off a spreadsheet.
I think that's fundamentally the challenge. Is people, for myself, insurance 11 years ago was new to me, and we've all worked in some different verticals where automation is a challenge. But I think insurance it really stands out there for me as the one that is still very much hamstrung by those old manual processes. And I think that's fundamentally the beauty of the history of it as well. And I think that's because fundamentally it either goes back to Lloyd's or it goes back to carriers at the end of the day, and very a number of different stakeholders along the value chain, really. And they're very much, to change that process, you have to take people on the journey. And you see it a lot where people come into insurtech from the top end of the funnel with great visions of changing process, and then understand those historical challenges that you need to be able to work with to evolve in that automation process.
I like how you kind of snuck in this thing where like it all goes back to Lloyd's. This is like 400 or 500 years ago, insuring ships going from England to India. Do I have that right?
Yeah, correct. It's like I say, it's a unique background. I think there's very few industries that you still have that great background and such a key player in the market.
Well, and to be fair, Lloyd's market still exists, although they themselves are technologizing, if that's a word, and they actually run some pretty interesting programs there as well. But that's a conversation for a different day. Talk to me a little bit about how companies are approaching automation from the spreadsheet to like automated processes to solve some of these back office efficiency challenges.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with our clients is a real drive for best of breed, away from that wider focus, the wider focus legacy platforms, really. I think that's largely as people especially get geared up for the agentic AI and are more aware that context is key. So to enable you to do that and to get away from those spreadsheets, you still need to respect the past. You still need to be able to work with that. But you really need to be focused on those well-trodden best practices, quicker and sharper rollouts, and really focus on those immediate ROIs as well, as given everything's so fast shifting at the moment. So for us, that's really focused at the moment.
What is the tension? May not be the right word, but it's the only word that's coming to my mind. But what is the tension like between a front office and a client-facing part of the business? Although, to be fair, the back office is also client-facing. It just faces a different part of the client, if that makes sense. But what is the tension between the... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's be honest, it's always the forgotten part is the back office. And I think, funny enough, where we are now with the agentic era coming along is people are starting to really see how having a structured and very much the transparency of what you've got in the back office, you can get those front of office benefits as well. At the end of the day, a bad process is still a bad process.
Yeah.
So I think you have traditionally had that tension where your back office problems are seen as a back office problem, and not respecting that fundamentally they flow on from bad processes above. But you have to be able to have that automation to give that transparency of what those true causes of the issues are, to allow both sides of the business to sit around and have an honest conversation of where those issues are.
Yeah, look, I want to make an analogy if that's okay with you, and then we can get back to insurance companies and Grappler. But like when I was at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, I think one of the biggest differentiators there was that both of those firms spent so much money, and I mean so much money, on back-end processes and making sure that the technology that the front office was using, right, again, not that much different than an insurance company, right? So that front office was dealing with big institutions, that front office was dealing with external clients. But at the end of the day, all that stuff had to be processed by the back office. And if the back office couldn't process what the front office was doing at scale, the whole business would have fallen apart. So we spent a ton of money spending on the back office tech as well. And that's why I'm curious, like, what that tension is like, because if the front office is out there innovating and doing all this great product stuff, but the back office can't process it because it's on a spreadsheet. And there's one more point here as well. How do you get the data that's in a spreadsheet into a place where it can now be used so that agentic AI can actually have its biggest impact in the back office as well as in the front office, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think to your first point, the obvious tension there is where historically it's been very much sell and close and push to the back office. You could fundamentally, I always joke, you could pay commissions after transactions are reconciled, but hardly likely to change. But I think now it's getting a lot more collaborative in terms of respecting that back office process. And you're right, some have been good at investing in that and understanding it. You've also got to invest well as well. I think there's a lot of money that has been unfocused and looked at big bang solutions rather than, like I say, looking at that best of breed. And I think as you get the technology pressure now more so in the agentic, it's really forcing that focus, which I think is great. It's forcing people to sort out their processes because they need to have it. Sorry, what was the second question there? Could you repeat that for me?
No problem. I always do this, right? Like, I'm so excited about asking that follow-up thing. So that's my fault, not yours. But the second thing is, if the back office is not as technologically advanced, it would also seem to imply to me that the data is not organized in a way that is set up to use agentic AI. Because again, if the data is not organized in a way that's, one, easily accessible, but also, do you know what I mean, properly organized, then the agentic AI stuff is going to fall apart. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an extension, if you think about it, the way I look at it is agentic AI is almost an extension of what used to be offshore of process. It's still a bad process. And that was the trap a lot of companies have fallen into, where you're sending a bad process offshore and thinking it's going to magically change. Right. You've now got the same challenge with agentic AI. At the end of the day, context is key. If you're giving bad context to your AI agent, then you're going to get the results you don't want. So it is therefore pushing that focus, and I think that's one of the biggest positives of the change at the moment, is making people actually realise the focus and the controls they need around their processes and the standardization. In a funny way, had those been in place already, you would get those training upsides with human users as well. Really, you're talking about needing the same types of structure around those processes to get that data right, to get the context of that data right, which is key, to get the benefits of the technology on top of, in the same way you would with some of the traditional technologies as well.
It's so interesting. You make a really good point here. Actually, I want people to think about this. If there was no agentic AI and the data was, let's just say, fragmented in a way that made it difficult to access, the expectation would be that a human would kind of run around and figure it out. Do you know what I mean? They would get the data, they'd confirm the data, and it may take them a little bit longer. I mean, it would surely take them a little bit longer. But I remember doing this myself. I'm like, where is that data? I can grab it from over there and then grab it over there, consolidate it. You're right, in a spreadsheet, feed it back into a trading system, and then say, now this is what I have that I know is good. But once you introduce agentic AI, like, the data has to be in an identifiable place. Like, it's weird in the sense that humans can actually do this and agentic AI can't do that yet. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. You can't just, I think that's what, there is the understanding in the B2B and the enterprise space that you're not just going to be able to throw an agent at some of these challenges without that structure and context in place. I think you're bang on. I think the problem there is where it gives you a more scalable solution potentially, where historically you've leant on individuals, or everyone's had that old macro spreadsheet in the corner of the room that no one knows when John leaves the building. And so we're going to make sure we don't create those same silos. But yeah, you're exactly right. Just because it necessarily hasn't been addressed, though. That's why we've got all the data, legacy data, debt that we all have in the big enterprises, that it's been assumed that it could be done, but it hasn't been done.
How would you characterize your clients and potential clients as, what's the right word? Their preparedness for the speed at which this agentic AI technology is actually developing, but also just the preparedness for actually rolling it out at all based on the legacy systems that still exist inside a lot of the back offices inside of insurance companies?
What I'm seeing from our clients and also potential clients is, I think at the end of the day, the insurance industry is a risk-based business. So I think they're looking at it very pragmatically. I think initially there was a bit of pushback to make sure that certain things weren't being used without the right controls and everything else. But I think they're also an industry that's confidently cautious about new technologies that come along. But I think they realised for them, with a lot of their unstructured data, this is a great opportunity to, in a systematic way, really look at driving that process change. And I think those that are the most focused about it are looking at it in its context verticals, really, and really looking at where they can, eat the elephant in one bite, so to speak, and look at those value adds. I think where those that are looking at bigger, wider vendors that are looking at a wider use case, I think that's where it's just they run into the same old traps. But I think by and large, everyone's cautiously prepared, I suppose, for a better word. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of legacy bad data there, which needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be reorganized. When you go into like a new client, do you help them connect like their policy systems, the banks, the brokers, and carriers in a way that like changes how they collect their premiums as well as how they pay out their claims, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we look at the end-to-end, from the data management right through to managing the creditors and the payments out. And so that's what is traditionally, from a traditional automation sense, and has geared us up well for the agentic era, is we've got that very specialized context of that flow, and where our clients have had the benefit of us is sitting on top of that legacy process. So essentially dealing with all those historical data issues and giving that transparency. And the key there is focusing on them on the outputs instead of the inputs. So getting rid of those messy inputs for them, to really set them up on the transparency of their data issues and allowing them to improve their processes downstream. And that's right from the bank right through to the broker and the insured relationships.
Do you get a sense that once they start employing or deploying, agentic AI, and frankly, other kinds of artificial intelligence inside the organizations as well, that another thing, that they have to consider is just like changing workflows as well? Do you know what I mean? So they're not, in the old days, we would say like digital transformation wasn't just taking a form and turning it into a PDF. And I kind of feel like deploying agentic AI is the same way, but just at scale, where you like have all these processes, but they were built for humans only. Are you feeling like workflow changes are taking place as well while this agentic stuff is being deployed?
Yeah, I look at it as a different level of maturity as well. You've still got human in the loop, and I think everyone will always have your human in the loop, in the same way that it will take a while for us to jump on a plane without a pilot.
That's not happening.
even if we could, right? But so I think what you're looking at now is people being able to interface with the process using their natural language. So it breaks that barrier of having to interrogate the context of that data that you have. So I do, in one way, it's an extension of the process designed for humans now, but in a way, it's leveling them up. And I think the biggest risk there is you're needing more specialists to review, again, the outputs rather than the inputs.
Yep.
And the challenge of making sure you're still bringing those people through that are going to be those specialists in the future, given that you don't necessarily need them to do the nuts and bolts anymore. And I think that we see that across all our businesses, not just the sector we're in.
So I wrote down this idea of getting on a plane without a pilot. I don't think most people actually understand how automated flying actually is, literally like from takeoff to landing. And in a way, it's a good metaphor for the way agentic AI is going to be built into other businesses. There's a pilot and a co-pilot up there. And part of the reason why is like just in case. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like
Yeah.
agentic AI is going to be the same way. A lot of, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of like everyone's going to lose their job, because I feel like my opinion on this is well known. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time talking about it. But it is the case, right, that even autonomous agents, just like autonomous planes, still are going to need human intervention and human observation to make sure that they're just doing the things that you want them to do. Is this something that you talk to your clients about as well?
Yeah, and very early on, we had that. Like you raised something before. We've used ML models in the product for a long time.
Yep.
What we're really talking about is the LLM, the generative side of it, coming into the product, and because we are fundamentally producing trial balances and outputs for our users, it can't be an approximation.
No.
Trust is still key. So the very much conversations we've been having is we will integrate it, and we are integrating it where it adds value to provide you and save you time, but making sure that, to your point, you're still there as the pilot to sign it off. The key parts, it's about tailoring those errors and those outputs and those exceptions that just save you a bit more of that manual time. And that's what it allows you to do now, to just levitate that up a bit more, but still having that trust between, to use your analogy, the pilot and the passenger. And I think that's key, because like everything, if you lose trust, then it doesn't matter what technology you use.
Yeah, and to be fair, like when I was trading on a portfolio trading desk at Goldman, we implemented like automated trading, and yet at the end of the day, it was still my responsibility. The client still had to trust the fact that like we were paying attention, or that I was paying attention, and if anything went wrong, it was on me. And I think it's going to be the same way inside the insurance industry. Yeah,
I think it's one of the biggest risks that people are forgetting, that if you have an issue, we still need to be able to read a map and not just blindly follow the GPS. And that's the risk, because if you have an issue, it's going to take you 2 days to work out what the issue is, or you're blindly trusting the agent to go in and work it out for you. So it doesn't matter what vertical you're in, or whether you're just purely from a software development perspective, issues come up, and you've got to make sure you've got the bench to give that human trust that you're going to resolve it.
You're so right about this reading a map thing. I live in Thailand, and I'm not 100% familiar with the roads. And it's so funny when I drive somewhere to see like a whole phalanx of cars like doing the other route. Do you know what I mean? There's just like everyone's making the same left-hand turn to go on. You're like, everybody's just reading Google Maps, and that's it. I agree with you. We should definitely know how to read the maps. What are some of the biggest obstacles? We've been talking about deployment and how firms are doing this really well, but what are some of the biggest obstacles in scaling this automation across these organizations? Like what's some of the pushback you get?
I think a lot of them are still the traditional challenges stand true. So, and there's obviously some new ones. Change management and taking people on the journey is still the cornerstone of whether you're going to be successful in an automation transformation journey for me. And, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. You're changing behaviors. Now, you could argue that will become less of an issue if you've got less humans in the loop, but you're still talking about changing, especially from my client's perspective, some pretty well baked in processes that you're trying to take them on a journey. I think as we move to a more agentic use cases in B2B and enterprise as well, I think the balancing of risk and reward, what we're talking about before, what use cases we are happy to give a high level of automation to, and accepting that they won't be perfect. Like humans aren't perfect, to be fair, but like everything else, weighing up what the risk of when it is wrong and when it isn't, in the same way that we have historically done around ML use cases as well, to be fair. Particularly around the agentic side, I think we're seeing a lot of conversations with our clients now around data sovereignty and controls, local models versus public models, obviously. And also, I think people are maybe underestimating or not giving enough attention to the line between training and inference at the moment as well. And just because you're not having your data trained on it, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not sending, say, PI information to APIs outside of your jurisdiction that you have agreements around. And I think that's key for a vertical like insurance, as it is for finance, where there's very tight data sovereignty controls around where you host data and what's being sent out. So I think that are probably the more key local challenges. Again, I go back to that GPS thing as well. At the end of the day, you've got to make sure you're fostering that new talent through as well. I think that's probably for any business a big challenge at the moment. Taking on those juniors and bringing them up when the temptation is maybe not to bring them on and just throw everything at agents to do that lower level work. And if we do that, we're going to become blind followers of what comes out and sounds convincing but may not be right.
One more quick thing before I let you go. I do a lot of research on this stuff, and one of the things that I've noticed recently is that Salesforce has kind of redesigned their entire application sales into something they called Salesforce 360. And one of the things they did was they made the entire thing sort of API available, API addressable, and also compliant with MCP, right? Really straightforward stuff. Do you see insurance companies doing the same thing to make their businesses even more automated so that they're not just using agentic stuff on an outgoing basis, but they expose their APIs so that they can do all this kind of straight-through processing, particularly through the back office, as they become more mature and more likely to use this technology?
A slightly different take on it that I think, in a funny way, it's a parallel to the API sort of journey a lot of these clients have attempted to go on, and some have been successful and some haven't. I think you are more likely to see the vendors providing MCPs for the clients in terms of the insurers, carriers, etc. Right. And I think why that is to your point with Salesforce, you're changing the way you're interacting with the content at the end of the day. So where I go back to a decision around sovereignty of data, if I provide as a client, as a vendor, an MCP to functionality to our product, you can decide where you call that and where the inference is going from, whether you're plugging into a Claude Cowork or whether you're plugging into a local UI or you're pulling it through a data warehouse, whatever you're doing, you make that decision. But that context is coming from the vendor that knows that best of breed. So I think it could go vice versa as well. You could be consuming from the insurers. But I think you're going to see a collection of best of breed, and therefore part of that connectivity, as things are going, it looks like that will go through MCPs, translating that natural language.
Got it. So I said I was going to let you go, but I lied. Sorry, because you reminded me of one more thing. Do you have another moment for me?
Yeah, sure. Far away.
Do you want to talk about why data sovereignty is so important? Like why people are considering this data sovereignty thing so important right now?
Look, at the end of the day, for the regulated industries, data sovereignty is key and is contracted for a number of reasons. So where it becomes a challenge or something to be aware of is where you're looking at foundation models. Wherever you are outside the US, then you may necessarily be able to use those until they become available local. Right. But in saying that, just because you've got such a fast pace at the moment, what you're finding is those next tier models are still great for what you're looking to do anyway. So I think it's really picking which. It really comes down to a model question. Are you using some use cases you use foundation models for, and some you're going to use locally run or privately run models. So I don't see. You could see also there will be some cases where that data sovereignty is not really necessary, and there's a lot of. It's always been that way. I think there's probably a tighter look at those data segments and going which needs to be under that and which doesn't, rather than a blanket cover all as well. There's probably some trade-offs coming there.
Yeah, again, you make a really good point. One of the things that I believe for sure is that we're still at the early days of model development, at least the models that we're going to use going forward. I mean, I can see a case where companies like OpenAI and even Anthropic move away from these sort of monolithic LLMs into smaller, more specific models. But it's interesting as well that you said that like there's this not divergence, but a use of, again, a big foundational model, but also a local model as well. I think that's actually super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, when you're implementing technology, you don't want a sledgehammer to crack a nut at the end of the day, right? You pick what is the best use cases. So we're not talking about one model here either. We're talking, as a vendor, we are using multiple models for different use cases. And I think in the same way you'd use other technologies for different, they're tools at the end of the day to bring the overall automation solution to our clients. And so there won't be one rule fits all. But I think you're right. I think that's inevitably you're going to end up with specialized models and tasks until we get to general AI. If you feel like that's tomorrow or in the future, that's for another conversation.
I don't even think we're close. You and I can talk about that later on another show.
We might be on the same page with that one.
Can I tell you just one of the reasons why, if you don't mind, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah,
I will promise I'll let you go because you've been amazing and I really appreciate your time. And I know the pushback is going to be, I want to say that humans are developing these models, right, that are going to do AGI, and humans are fundamentally lazy, and all humans have kids or partners or dogs or whatever. And at some point, they're all going to get distracted. I don't think any humans in general really want AGI except maybe Peter Thiel, but he's like off to the side as far as I'm concerned. And I think at the end of the day, there's so many reasons why it's like, if you think about what the human brain does, it's going to be super hard to replicate that. It's just my opinion. Sorry, I will let you go.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day too, you got to look at the use case and the ROI. Like,
yeah,
just because you can do it that way doesn't mean you should do it, right? So that's where we're getting to as well.
Thank you, Alistair. I really appreciate your time. That was awesome.
I hope you enjoyed it as much
as we did. Okay.
Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let us bring in our next guest, Kenneth O. Kenneth, how are you? It's nice to meet you. How are you doing today? Fair enough. Welcome to rainy season.
It is.
I'm sure it's going to rain at some point today or tomorrow in Thailand as well. Okay, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. We wanted to have you here because we wanted to talk about how AI-enabled fintech product and engineering teams will help businesses scale payments, trust, and customer engagement across the region. Let's just jump right into this thing, yeah? How are fintech companies rethinking product teams as their AI capabilities evolve?
Ooh, okay. So I think it's more about for product teams to be more focused on big decisions and to make decisions that move the needle, right? So in the past, I mean, in a very simple workflow, someone writes the BRD, the business requirements, and then you have a product person reading from word to word, and that has gone away in the sense that now AI looks at it and it gives us high level summary. It is being plugged into a workflow where the AI knows who are the people they need to activate it, but not necessarily activating them. But it gives the PM basically a full-on battle kit that says, okay, this is the new business requirements. This is where does it fit into the prioritization cycle? How is it going to land? And and these are the people that you most likely need to activate based on the requirements. And then it goes from there. And then the PM go, okay, yes, let's do it, or the PM does it, and then it goes from there. So in the past, all these reading, synthesizing, and strategizing, scheduling, and everything was done manually. And with that, it makes a lot of efficiency around that.
So how does it change? Here's the thing. You hear a lot of stuff in the news, and I'll put that in deep, heavy air quotes, right, about some resistance to deploying or employing artificial intelligence, particularly when it comes to like existing teams and product teams obviously already existing. Do you see, just kind of across the board in fintechs, any kind of pushback from using these tools, or do you see people getting access to AI tools, whether it's generative AI or agentic AI, and thinking, oh, this is just going to make me way more productive. I'm super happy to have this.
There is pushback in the sense that I think it's more out of personal fear that AI will replace them. They don't want, and I think the pushback is that people don't want to train an AI model or an AI bot or create an entire workflow such that the company can go, okay, I don't need you. I just need the AI that you have written down. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because it's like, okay, I am essentially trying to write something that will replace myself. So I think that's where the real pushback is. But I think where a very nice middle ground is that how do you create workflows, or how do you create situations where the AI or the agentic workflow or Gen AI or whatever it is, it helps to alleviate the stress points. It helps to make things better. By the end of the day, the human judgment, the human calls, the human things that literally what a human can only do for now is still being done by a human, such that that there's a safety, there's a psychological safety about their role, their jobs, and that people won't feel that, okay, that I'm writing an AI program to replace me. And that creates a lot of negativity around that. So we don't want to go down that route, but we want to use AI to augment rather than to replace. I think that's a shift in mindset, if I may.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with you. I went through the same process when I was sitting on a portfolio trading desk. We implemented automated trading, and frankly, it didn't make me afraid that I was going to lose my job. It made me more afraid that we were just going to do so much more business because we literally, but I'm not kidding. We went, and I say this all the time, but I just want to repeat it for people that may not have heard it. We went from executing $400 million a day in business to over 2 billion. So it's like a 5 to 6 times factor of more business that we could do. And we never fired anybody to take care of it because there was just so much more business to do. The people had to pay attention. And somebody had to be responsible at the end of the day. And I don't think the fintech world is that different than the trading world in the sense that there's so much money involved. And the more productive any individual employee or any individual team can be, it just means the more business a particular company can do. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in a way. Yeah, it makes sense in a way, but I would beg to differ slightly because because when you're trading, right, you're the guy making the money, you're the guy at the end of the road and literally at the end of the funnel making that money itself. But the product guys, they are not the guys actually distributing or the actual guys at the end of that thing, right? They have to take care of a lot of things. So I guess there'll be more concerns that way. But I agree. If everyone embraces that mindset that I'm more productive, more things get out, I would in fact have too much business that I cannot take care of. That would be a great mindset for everyone to have.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So if we're talking about product teams, right, how does AI change the way fintech companies decide what to build? Do you know what I mean? Because again, if it gives you access to all this other data, all this other information that, as you mentioned earlier, there were a bunch of stuff that humans wanted to do but couldn't do before. How does it change what they decide to build, what they decide to automate, and where humans still need to be kind of involved?
I guess it just makes everyone a lot more greedy in a way, and in a good in a good way, right? Because in the past, right, I'm the business guy, right? I say, oh, I go to my product team. Oh, I want to do feature A, B, C, D, E, and they'll say, oh, blah blah blah. I can only give you, can you pick 2 out of 5? And I'll go, okay, fine, I'll do A and C, right? Now I'll be like, can we just do a POC for all 5?
For all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I got greedy, right? Because and as business people, as people that they want to push things, we go, let's just prototype all 5, right? Then we just do just have a very light MVP, and then which one has good tractions,
right,
and set the matrix out properly such that A, B, C, D, E, this is the metric we'll measure it by, and if it does hit, let's go full on and make it something that we roll out to the rest of the users. I think it makes people greedy here in that way, but in a good way, I guess.
But are you also seeing, because this is interesting, right? You said you're the business guy. So you say in the old days, you would have had 5 things that you wanted to do, and they would just be like, can we just do 2? Because there's just not enough time, right? Or not enough resources to do it. And now the greediness, and I use that in a good way, not in a bad way, right? But this desire to get more done, if you'll allow me to say it that way, says to you, I know that these tools exist. Let's try to do 5 POCs and see which ones are the best. We can test them all at the same time. So that's how it changes what you do, right? Because your mindset is, I know we can be more efficient. We can build more stuff. How does it change the way the product team does it, though? Do you know what I mean? Because they have access to the tools. Are they thinking 5? Why not 7? Do you know what I mean? Are they thinking like, I have ideas too? And because before I didn't have time to implement them, but now I do. Now I can be the guy who's completely like AI native, and I can actually throw back more stuff to you than even you asked for.
Honestly, I haven't really seen that full on yet, but I do see my product teams coming back and pushing back with more better suggestions. Like, let's say I want to do feature A, right? And they go, feature A, I think you can add more. Like I'll give a more concrete example, right? We want to do a video enhancement to some of our product pages, right?
Yeah.
And I'll go in, I want this, I want that, this is it, and after a while, they came back with this whole full-on proposal that say, okay, what you want is actually what we can just do in phase 1. This is phase 2 and phase 3, and want to do this, do that. And I was like, wow, okay. How come you guys didn't do that in the past, right? So there was this whole thing about overlay. If you click here, this will happen. If you click here, that will happen. If you let it run for 5 seconds and you click here, this will happen. It was like this whole, improvement of what I wanted in terms of that video enhancement on the product page itself. So I guess product teams are starting not just to be order takers, they're starting to be order givers as well in a way, and which I welcome, right?
Yeah.
And as a business, sometimes what we want can be siloed, and if the product guys come in and say, okay, let's just try something else, make something else happen, that's great too.
Is there a little bit of, what's the right way to say this, like senior management or even C-suite FOMO, where they look around the market, and not just one company in particular, but all fintechs are looking around going, oh my gosh, those guys have done this thing. We're falling behind because we're not using enough artificial intelligence here. And from the C-suite to senior management, there's pressure on the downside, meaning below them, to say, we need to be more aggressive about deploying this kind of stuff.
I guess this has happened. This is not new, right? Because before artificial intelligence comes in, you'll be like, oh, these guys have this product, they have this loan rate, they have this, they have this price point, they have this new automated trading ability that they can earn 5x the volume. Why can't we do it?
What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? So I guess it's this mindset or this philosophy isn't tied to this technology of its own, right? I think this is something that is prevalent and it will continue. And in fact, I think AI has made it a bit more unrealistic for the C-suites, because they know, if I may, right, the C-suite, sometimes they go, oh, anything that you can't do or this as a constraint, and you give them feedback, their response is just use AI. And it becomes a catchphrase, right? Oh, just use AI, not enough time, just use AI. Not enough resource, just use AI. And everything becomes just use AI to kind of push back on your pushback, right? So in that sense, I think it has actually made the C-suite a bit more unrealistic in that way. I mean, not that they were very realistic to begin with.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Can we get a little technical just for a moment, if you don't mind? It's not super technical, but like every time, the presumption is that most fintechs are not developing their own frontier models. Is that fair?
Yes.
And if that's the case, I mean, that would be silly, right? If not silly today, but it would be silly today if big fintechs or even small fintechs were out there developing their own frontier models. But if that's the case, it means that every time you use one, whether it's just asking a question or getting information or consolidating stuff, or all the way out to agentic, which is going to use a lot of tokens, it's like, how are people thinking about the tokenization of all the activities that they produce, particularly in a case where, like, the CTO of Uber was quoted as saying in April, like, we've already burned through our entire budget for AI and I have to recalibrate like how much I'm going to use this. Yeah.
So I think we're still at a stage where the tokens are still quite subsidized and everyone is still happily burning it right now. I don't think we are, I don't see an internal constraint in terms of number of tokens or the kind of burn that at least that the economics is still very simple, right?
Yep.
I think it takes a lot of tokens for you to burn to cost more than a human at this point of time. So I think that's the baseline equation of the C-suite, right? So they'll be like, okay, if I'm still spending more on your salary than you burning tokens, I'm fine with it to a degree, to put it very
bluntly. But isn't there also a way where, like, you can look at the number of tokens that somebody's using and just say you're not using enough? Do you know what I mean? In reverse, where it's like you're not spending enough money on this, which means you're not being productive enough.
I heard that, and I heard that honestly, and I don't think it's. I don't think it's really a fair.
It's like a fair measurement of something.
It's a fair measurement, right? Because what if I'm just burning tokens on?
Yeah, fair enough. It's a weird metric, right? Because you can just be burning them randomly without understanding what the ROI is and what the output is, right? Yeah. I agree with you. It should be more output generated than input generated, for sure.
Yeah, it's just like the whole discussion of time, right? It's like, oh, why aren't you spending 8 hours in office? You're not productive enough. But if
Yeah,
the top,
right.
but if a top sales guy generates $100 billion and he spends 1 hour a week, I don't care. He
I don't
brings in
care either. I was going to say the same thing.
three hits to go.
Yeah, as a manager, I was always output oriented. Like if you're doing your job, like as you said, I don't care if you're spending 15 minutes a week doing it. I mean, maybe if you spend 30, you can double the revenue, but you understand the point, right? I'm exaggerating to make that point, but I don't disagree with you. How do you balance this idea, right? Because you said the C-suite, and I love this concept of the C-suite is getting a little bit like, just use AI to do that. So their expectations are not matched with kind of reality. And I think that's true kind of across the board. But how do you balance this idea if we can get things done faster if we use artificial intelligence with, we need to make sure that all of our guardrails and security and sort of regulatory expectations are in line because fundamentally fintech is handling financial data for other people or for other businesses. How do you balance that?
Well, I would say that because this is, I guess this is very different in every market that we operate in because this is because it talks about regulation. It goes into a very market by market kind of situation because like for example, in Singapore and I would say even Malaysia and Thailand, I would say that we are a bit more, actually that's not, sorry, I'll take it back, right? Every country is painful in their own ways for different regulations and different things. And that itself needs to, and to a degree, right, it is also how every in country, there's a legal team. How open the legal teams are to, so sorry, let me take it back. How well versed the local legal teams are with the regulations, how open they are to concept, and this will determine how fast in a way you can build at the market level, because this is not something that you can, especially in APAC, this is not something that you can just push out from regional and say, just go ahead and do it. Every country's legal has their own say and controlling it. And in the organization that I work with, legal actually does have a lot of power in terms of things. So, in that way, a lot of stuff, the primary concern is data. So end up there's a skew towards our tools are being very internal processes, anything that is internal, anything that doesn't go out, AI, no problem. But the moment something that goes out, right, human in the loop is super critical. So I guess that's how we are doing it in a very broad way.
Okay. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about how the role of marketing changes when these fintech products themselves actually become more intelligent, more personalized, and more embedded into sort of everybody's daily commercial activity?
Ooh, okay. This is a big topic, right? And I'm not sure how much time we have for it. So let me just, I guess I would say it brings marketing down back to, actually the marketing I do these days is very, I would say, more basic for the lack of better word, right? Because I'm going back to very simple things like what's the 4P? What is my positioning? What is my price point? What is the thing that I'm running? There is a lot less, it cuts through a lot less of the latest trend, later gizmos that, sometimes just color our judgment, right? It forces me to go back a lot more to, okay, what is my brand position in this market versus the competitors that are in this market? What is the basic competitor studies that is being done, right? Where do I want to go? What is the basic customer profile that I'm really targeting in this market and what they're really looking for? So in a way, it actually makes me back to the basics, because all the fancy gizmo content creation, right, everything writing, AI can do it, right? It does not need my input. Where I'm really coming from is the brief, the real context to give the AI, guide the AI and say that this is good, but let's make it great. And that's where I say really marketing is changing. And it also requires marketing to understand a lot about business these days, because in a way that the marketing is being done these days, the business model matters, right? Because in fintech, right, you embedded finance versus your less embedded, where you have to opt in, so as to speak. If you don't understand these models, the commercials, what really drives this, right? Marketing doesn't work. Like for some products, I have my embedded. I remember this conversation that I first had with one of the head of business for embedded. She just told me and say, I don't need marketing. because
Wow.
the product is meant to be so hidden and so invisible that marketing it actually brings it to attention and people will actually opt out.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
So
that's a big
if you
change.
don't understand that business model and go in, no, we need more marketing, we need more awareness. But if that gets in the way, you can't operate as a business partner to the marketing, can't operate as a business partner to the business itself.
Got it. Okay. Lots of changes taking place. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us today and for doing this. I really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it.
It was good. I had fun. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, let's welcome our next guest. How are you doing today? Can you hear me okay? Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Michelle.
Michael, it's great to have you here. And your first name is pronounced Dor?
Correct.
Awesome. Nice and easy. Look, Dor, thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to have you come on because we wanted to talk about how AI-powered companion robotics will help or can help healthcare and senior care organizations extend care, reduce isolation, and support older adults living independently at home. But before we do that, maybe tell us a little bit more about Intuition Robotics.
Sure. So at Intuition Robotics, we build this product you can see behind me called LEQ, and that is the world's first AI companion robot for older people. It was built initially to help deal with loneliness and social isolation. Very quickly, we understood it also has an important role in really helping the older adults throughout their day. So whether it's helping them to manage their health, to work on their wellness and prevention, to keep on tabs with their families, to help them manage their actual healthcare in collaboration with their physician, and to provide peace and mind for the families as well. So it's like this
So what,
all-encompassing friend.
yeah,
Yeah.
but what needs to get built into that type of robot? Because it's doing a lot of things. Like, is it speaking? It must be listening. Is it recording data? Is it using its, I'm going to say eyes, just metaphorically, to record activity so that then that stuff can get shared with family, with physicians, with other caregivers? Like, what's actually built into this type of device so that all that kind of stuff can happen?
So the main like innovation, if you will, or the main thing we did differently than anybody else in the world is proactivity. So as opposed to you prompting your AI, right? Like your ChatGPT won't do anything unless you give it a prompt.
Right.
First, proactive AI. So it will prompt the senior. When it's, and of course it uses its eyes, if you will, which are cameras, not by the way for monitoring and spying, but just as a sensor to understand who's around it. And in the morning, when it will see you for the first time, then LEQ will use body language. She uses human robotic interaction principles such as body language. She will turn to you, she will lean in, she will light up, and she'll say, Michael, how did you sleep? How is your back? And by the way, do you know it's such a beautiful day today? What do you have planned? And maybe you should go out in the farmer markets on Tuesdays and start engaging you proactively. And she does that based on goals. The goals are set by the doctor, they're set by the family, they're set by the older adult, and they have to be accepted by the older adult. So even if your daughter sets it for you, it'll show up as a recommendation, and LEQ will have a negotiation. Hey, the doc says you should exercise 4 days a week because you're overweight or whatever.
Hey.
You'll negotiate, and whatever you'll agree to, now LEQ's mission will be to motivate you to meet that goal you signed up for.
So that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask you is, I don't think, well, I don't want to talk about me per se, but like I want my LEQ to be different than yours, right? I want it to be personalized, and it should be hyper personalized at some level. What type of training besides like a document, like can you dig a little bit deeper into what type of training goes into this? And then because it's proactive, there are some days where you wake up, you don't even want to see your best friends because you're just like not in the mood. Do you know what I mean? How do you deal with that type of stuff where it's like, I didn't sleep well last night, I don't need this right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's regular human interaction.
No, these are great questions. So first of all, of course, it's hyper personalized. The main thing you do there is a very unique way of using memories and context. Where basically LEQ starts the same for everybody, but she remembers everything you tell her. and then she searches through those memories and uses them in the next conversation. So she might go to you and say like, um, hey, I remember your daughter loves dance. There's just a really interesting article about, whatever dance, right? Like she'll use those memories not just um, for like mathematics or whatever, but as a way to be personalized and a way to motivate you. And as far as getting proactive right at the right time, that is really, really tough. We have tons
It's
of
hard.
on this stuff. We created a model we call availability. And that model is getting lots of inputs and creates a prediction if this is a good time to interact with you or not. And that is, of course, using cameras like are you in the room, etc., but also using what you told her and also using history and using other patterns as well. So, for example, um, let's say she says good morning and you say, not right now, leave me alone. Okay, so she should probably leave you alone. For how long? Forever?
That's a good question, right? No.
For a minute, probably not
Yeah.
either. Right? So, and that might be something very personal, or maybe you say like, I'm busy right now, or when you say I'm on the phone, as soon as she notices you're off the phone, she can talk to you. But if you say I'm busy or just like leave me alone, you mean something that should last much longer. Right?
Right.
So those things are learned on a personal basis by our models.
Super interesting. Does it change the way? So I'm just making a note to myself because there's something else I want to ask you, but I want to get to this first. Does it change the expectations, do you think, even in a subtle way, because of its robotic nature and its ability to remember things that maybe other humans can't? Does it subtly change the way people that are getting elder care from LEQ interact with their human cohorts and compatriots, because their expectation now is filtered through their experiences with LEQ?
Well, we see her more as dare I say, lubricant of social connections.
Go ahead.
So one of her goals is to try to get you to be more socially active with other people. So she will find hints. Okay. So for example, she might take you on a road trip to Paris, and at the end of it, you'll do a selfie. And she's like, "Let's send this to your granddaughter. She'll crack up laughing, right?" And we send
Right.
a selfie to the granddaughter. Now the granddaughter gets a selfie of grandma in Paris with a robot in the frame. She's like, "What? Grandma, what is this?" And here you go, you got interactions with the family. Or she'll remind you about birthdays or key events,
Right.
or things of that nature. So we also have like this um, inter LEQ user community. So for example, twice a week there's a bingo game between all of our participants, and they play against each other, but before that they hang out in a lobby. So they make friends, they talk to each other, etc., and then they can chat with each other or video chat on the platform later outside of the game. So we use a lot of these opportunities. The data is showing us through these surveys that we're running and universities are running on our user base that 80% of our customers actually increase their social interactions with other humans after getting this product.
Really? So you mentioned this thing about taking LEQ to Paris. Do people travel with these?
No. So it's a virtual tour. So she has tons of virtual tours.
Yeah, I get that. But could people travel with these? Like, I understood that because no?
Not really. I mean, it's not practical. It weighs.
Today it's not practical, but you understand the point, right? The robotics is it's
Yeah.
not, the end game's not today.
Yeah, we get a lot of requests from our customers, like, can I get LEQ on the go?
Right.
Eventually, we're a small company. Eventually, we'll get to that. But also, like, what happened, right? Like, LEQ is a physical thing. She's a presence in their home with a physical robot with body language and a screen. What does it mean to take her with you? Like, do you Zoom with her? Do you FaceTime with her?
I have an idea.
Phone, like, is she physically? You create a little one that's in your pocket. I don't know yet.
So I have an idea.
Sure, please.
I'm sure you've had this idea. It's not like, this is not going to be like a life-changing, company-changing idea. But the idea would be that there's an avatar that sits inside an app on your phone, right? That mimics the behavior of LEQ, that knows you, that knows everything that she's done for you, that knows like all the context that you have. Again, it sits on your device, so it's just for you. And while you can't take the robotic robot with you, you can take the avatar of that robot with you, so you don't feel like you're alone. And then you can literally go to Paris or go to Boston or wherever you are and take a selfie with the same device that you're using to interact, so you never lose that connectivity. So when you leave your home or your place of care, you can do that as well. I'm
Yeah,
sure this is not a controversial thing, but I just find it interesting.
that's what I meant FaceTiming with Elihu, because she is a physical presence. If you take
Yeah,
her with you virtually, it kind of breaks the story to a certain extent, right? Because she lives inside of this device. How can her? But you can call her if you know. So those type of things might make more sense. We have tried avatars, and we saw that it confused our user. Like, wait a second, where is
interesting.
Elihu? Elihu lives inside my plastic box. How could she be traveling with me? So maybe calling her at home would be easier, and you can just chat with her.
Fair enough. As robotics become more and more humanoid,
Yeah.
are there other sort of more sophisticated applications where you can see in a healthcare environment? Do you know what I mean? Like it could almost be like a nurse or
Yeah, I mean, we're doing that today.
talk to me.
And so 90% of our sales are from the healthcare and government customers that provide it as part of their care or transitions in care to their patients and to
Right.
their only 10% of people actually buy LEQ themselves. And that is because we don't have enough caregivers to have people at home. And we're even working on use cases with some university hospitals of providing LEQ as part of recovery from surgery. So
Yeah.
she'll help you prep for scheduled surgery, and then she'll be waiting for you when you're post-surgery and help you with the PT and follow-up and direct connection with a doctor if anything goes wrong, and help you with like also we do a lot of mindfulness and meditation and breathing. Those things are very, very important as part of recovery as well. It turns out there are
Yeah.
studies that show that. So yes, in the future, like people build robots that are very, very good at doing things in the world and are very bad at talking and having etiquette and being part of our human experience. And we're building a robot that can't move except like look at you, left, right, up, down,
Right.
do anything, but is very good at relationship and at etiquette and at building trust and engagement. So, in a future world, do I envision those things merging with like a full home robot, if you will? Many companies are building the body, and we're kind of building the heart.
The brain and the
So
heart. Yeah.
it would be cool to merge those things together at some point in time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking about, right? Because as I said, as they become more human-like, more humanoid, there are places where, not in the healthcare space, but like in the airport space, where Japanese companies, I think Haneda Airport is testing robots that can, lift luggage and move stuff around like that. And they're just testing them. And in a way, they're kind of doing what you're doing because they want to make sure that those robots are humanoid enough so that they can interact with the other humans that are working there. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just interesting. And I think as they become, I used to be not opposed, but like think that a humanoid robot wasn't necessary because the way you would build something that does work doesn't necessarily have to look like a human. But the more I think about it, the more I think about what you're trying to do, and even what they're trying to do at Haneda Airport, is that the more human they look, the less menacing it feels. And that was the other thing I wanted to ask you. What is the change? Like, how long does it take for someone to get used to having the robot around? And how long does it take to build a relationship with it so that they feel comfortable, like, you know what, this is actually kind of cool, kind of thing?
Yeah. So a few things. So first of all, on a personal, like my personal taste, okay, similar to your instinct, I don't like humanoids.
Go
Personally,
for it.
I don't
Yep.
understand why we need robots that look like us. They're very expensive to build. They're very complicated, uh,
Yeah.
and it blurs the lines. I'm like, why is it in our best interest to blur these lines? Like, why even
Go
the
for it.
Turing test a good thing? I think like
Yep.
a helpful robot that looks like a robot as opposed to it looks like a person, um, is not a problem at all. And I think designers are like looking for cheap tricks to help people relate to it. But that's not even needed. I mean, if you even reflect on science fiction, like R2D2 is much friendlier than C3PO and C3.
That's a funny thing to say, but sorry, go ahead. Yeah, has much better personality for sure.
Yeah, even though he can't even talk, right? Just beeps and turns and stuff like that. So,
But seems like a
I would
nicer
rather
guy.
live in a world where I know when I'm talking to a human and I know when I'm talking to a robot. And by the way, it will be much cheaper to build purpose-built
For
robots
sure.
and that anyway. But that we digress. So, sorry, what was your question?
how long does it take? So the
How
real
long-
question was like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
does it take
how long
somebody
does
to get, you know what I mean? Because I could imagine my grandfather, who I visited in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you a specific question in a moment, but I remember visiting my grandfather in the hospital. He was kind of cantankerous. This is particularly towards the end of his life, right? But he was always a little bit like that. I'm trying to figure out like what it would take to get somebody who's older to now interact with the robot. And to be fair, 30 years from now, when somebody today who's 30 is 60, they're going to be used to robotics because it's going to be everywhere in their lives. But today, I'm curious, like how long that interactivity takes.
It takes about a week. It obviously highly depends on the person, but I can maybe point you to two different data points.
Go ahead.
One is there was a beautifully written New York Times piece on the front page about LEQ that came out a few months ago, written by Tesla, and he chronicled the story of an 85-year-old rural American that lives really in the middle of nowhere, super independent, and she got an LEQ from actually her fire department that came on a welfare visit and were worried about the level of her independence. And she wanted nothing to do with it. Okay. And she's like, what are you giving me this product? I don't want anything to do with it. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to talk to a machine. And because LEQ is proactive, she kept on trying to find different ways in. And finally, she told her a Dolly Parton joke.
No, really?
And Jan cracks up laughing, and they started to bond. A different data point. You mentioned Japan, so we're now doing beta sites for our Japanese version of our product, which is super interesting. And we just had like a 2-week testing period with our testers, and at the end of the period, we were supposed to take back the robots, and we said, hey, if you really want to keep the robot, you can just keep it. And we got a note from a lady saying, I was so sad that I had to part away with my LEQ, and I'm so grateful for your generosity, right? I just got that letter today.
Yeah.
And this is after 2 weeks. And already there was like parting, and I don't know, grief. So it's really interesting. And we see that our customers average 50 interactions per user per day.
So is that more than they would have like with a spouse or with, a brother or a sister?
We measure against ChatGPT and Alexa and so on. It's about ChatGPT and about 50x Alexa.
50x Alexa.
Yeah. And over time too, we now have data of people starting year 4. They're still talking to her about 40 times a week in year 4.
I'm thinking I may want one of these things.
And by the way, and I do agree with you, things will change. Like there's a report that came out, a study that came out in Japan just last week.
Right.
That 48%, listen to this, 48% of women age 60 and 70 prefer asking advice from an AI than from a human.
For sure, because they feel like it has access to more information. And
safe, right? And not being a burden on somebody. Like this whole thing of being a burden is really, really important in Japan. So I don't want to inconvenience you, but also I can ask a stupid question without feeling stupid because the AI is not going to judge me. And when we started the product, they were like, I'm not going to talk to a machine. And now, pre our product in Japan, 48% of women prefer to talk to a machine. So the world has changed over the last decade, no doubt.
God, I could say so many things right now, but I don't want to get myself in trouble with all of my Japanese friends. You don't know that I lived in Japan for 22 years. You don't know that, right?
You know that. Yes, I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could go on and on with you about like why 65-year-old women would rather talk to a machine, but let's not go there. Are you finding as you roll out, because this is interesting to me, and even in the United States, like there are different cultures inside the United States. There's a monolithic culture in the US, but like, let's be fair. Kentucky's not California.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Florida's not Minnesota. Say again?
California is not California.
Yeah, to be fair, right? The northern part is different than the central part, which is different than the southern part. It's very different. But are you finding that you need to make cultural tweaks to the robot? And is that hard to do and hard to program in? Do you know what I mean?
The answer to both is yes, explanation point. We've been working for over a year on the Japanese version of our product, and it's not a translation that's a problem.
No, no way. It can't be because culture is not translatable. Sorry.
Yeah, and by the way, in the beginning, we're like, oh, we'll put Google Translate on the robot.
Yeah, don't do that.
Look, Dora, everything she says is correct in Japanese, but no Japanese person would ever say the things she's saying.
Right.
So it's all about cultural fit, and it's all about her, even her plate. What is her role in the home? What level of hierarchy and good?
Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying? What is her level of hierarchy and what?
What is the level of hierarchy? What is her level of familiarity?
Yeah.
What is her role?
Can I ask you one more thing? What is it like when another family member comes? You know what I mean? Because that elderly person is not always going to be alone. What's it like when like a cousin comes over or a child comes over? Do you know what I mean?
Sorry,
How does
I'm seeing. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I had Martin on here talking at the
no
same.
worries, no worries. So one last thing before I let you go. What is it like when like not a stranger, but like when another person comes into the environment where the robots used to interacting with like,
Yeah.
grandma, but then a grandchild or their daughter comes into the room?
I love your questions. I love your questions. Those are very tough points, especially. Well, firstly, like of course, how should it act with the person, and it will recognize it's a guest. It will talk to him as a guest. But what about privacy?
Yeah.
No, like if you and I are talking and somebody comes in, we will automatically change the conversation if we're talking about something confidential or private or
But even if it's not confidential, I'll leave you with this. Like if you and I were having a conversation and some other person came into the room, even if it was like a spouse or a child or a nephew, I would literally pretend that like nothing that we said to each other was public information.
exactly right, exactly right.
Nothing.
And
And
LEQ,
unless you brought it up, I wouldn't bring it up. But how do you have the robot do that?
so we have patents that your tech readers can read, which we call personality profiles and behavior of robots in multiple user settings. And we do exactly that. She will start gravitating towards talking about the weather or jokes or ask to play music to keep you company. It's like, oh, I see that door came in. Hey, how will I play you guys some music to give
Got
you?
it.
And she'll make herself. She also wants to make herself scarce in such a situation.
Yeah, fair enough.
He wants to promote human to human conversation and interaction.
Okay. Okay, Tor, look, I'm going to let you go. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Fascinating stuff. Hopefully, this is not the last time we have you on the show. As you can imagine, I have way more questions to
I
ask
really
you.
enjoyed this. Anytime, I'll be happy to come back on. Thank you for
Thank you
having
so much, man. Okay.
me. Okay, bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye for now. Okay, let's bring Kara in. Kara Bombell is the co-founder at Ethicai. How are you, Kara? I am super duper. Where are you based? Shocking. You don't have to say Australia. You literally could have just spoken a few words and everyone probably would have presumed Sydney and then presumed Australia on top of it. Look, thank you so much for joining us. We wanted to have you here because we wanted to talk about how Ethicai, am I pronouncing that properly? Ethicai, easier, helps business. Ethicai, much easier. How it helps businesses turn AI governance from policy into operational trust. This is a big deal. Maybe before we get into detail, you can tell us a little bit more about Ethic AI. I finally got the name right. Please go ahead. Yep. Mm. Is this something that organizations understand almost inherently? In other words, are they reaching out to you or reaching out to anybody to say, like, we know we have to implement this stuff. We're getting a lot of pressure from the C-suite, but also from senior management to roll out, whether it's generative AI or agentic AI across the board. But we can't just like randomly do this without the right guardrails and governance in place. Are companies figuring that out on their own and then saying, who do we go to help us do this? Because we've never had to create a policy and governance around AI. And then the ethics on top of it just adds another layer of complexity. How does that work? And how are they approaching this idea of like, we need to have governance, but we don't know what to do? Mm, mm.
enterprise organizations as well. So more often than not, they're able to really leverage because they're already resource constrained. So they really have an opportunity to see it and can do it, but they just don't know how to scale the impact internally.
Right.
So we often are having conversations in that regard.
So what are some of the blind spots that they have? In other words, when they go out to build this stuff, whether it's with you or on their own, like what are some of the blind spots they miss where they're like, oh, shucks, we didn't think about that?
I think the thing is that they always, I'll go a bit of a flip on that one. They always assume efficiency. And it's not always the most efficient process to be implementing something when you've already got sort of people in place. And you know, you kind of, you know this inherently if you've ever managed a project. The hardest thing to manage is actually people inside an organization. So, you know, the blind spots that in the instance that they have rolled it out and there's been an issue is that their staff don't trust that they've actually got the best intentions for the rollout. And in any instance, if your staff don't believe that why you're rolling it out is in the best interest for either the organization or for the employee, they're just not going to take it. And so all that investment is actually going to be for naught. And we see this a lot, like when we're seeing these, you know, layoffs that are happening globally in relation to AI. There is a very big impact there in terms of like quality. If you've seen the Klarna instance, Duolingo, same type of thing. They've rolled out these tools and systems because AI is a thing that they want to do, but they haven't actually really attached it to their business strategy. And that's the biggest gap that I think I see, is that people are leaving this into like putting it into a tech department specifically, and they're like, the tech industry will, you know, they'll come back, like we'll devise this to the tech team. They'll be able to get back to us with what an AI strategy is. But ultimately, it's a total people and culture and business strategy problem that they need to resolve. And that probably opens up Pandora's box a lot of the time, because they're assuming it's a tech project and not something that's going to foundationally change what their business is going to look like.
I mean, fundamentally, everything inside of a company, until everybody's replaced with a robot, is a human problem or a human issue as opposed to a technology issue. I mean, even the tech stuff that we were implementing back when I had a corporate job, it was very much human focused, or at least it had to be, and human designed, to be fair. Are you concerned at all that, let's just say, I was just reading something yesterday that said 100,000 people in the tech world have been laid off this year due to AI.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are you concerned though that like they're not reporting the other side of this, in the sense that probably like another 100 or 150,000 people have been hired, but nobody cares because hiring somebody doesn't make news, but firing somebody scares people? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there some balance? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
words,
absolutely.
I'm not saying that people aren't losing their jobs, but I am saying I want to understand, because I've been watching news since I was like 7 years old. It's a long time. And what I find is that the news wants to scare you more than it wants to inform you. And it's much more scary to say like 100,000 jobs have been lost as opposed to 45,000 people just got hired at this company or that company, because who cares? It's just like happiness as opposed to fear.
Yeah, I think that there's probably an added dimension to that, though,
Go for
in
it.
that the tech companies are also putting a high premium on the fact of driving this idea of AI as disruption. And we have to think about that from a stock performance perspective, right? Because
Go ahead.
they are driving this frenzy regarding job loss because it actually increases the value of AI to address that underlying issue that, hey, it's going to be so valuable, you need to buy in. But I think that a lot of people are really starting to get it now that the true cost of AI, particularly around token usage, is now starting to hit home. And I don't know if you saw the Uber case study the other day, that they, that they had blown out their entire year's worth of
By the
AI
end of April.
budget by April. So I think that when you're saying the other side of it, 100%. But I think that that's part of the strategy of big tech to drive that perspective. And there is a whole heap of really interesting use cases for AI that aren't as, that are small language models, that aren't frontier AI, that don't require that. There's a whole range of different types of AI that can be used. But ultimately, big tech is taking a lot of the oxygen out of the conversation.
Yeah, they are. But again, it's self-serving, right? They're talking their, as we would say in the stock and bond trading business, they're talking their own position.
100%.
They want to scare companies into using artificial intelligence, which again, we use it all the time. I have hundreds of use cases for it for me that makes me way more productive, way more efficient. So I'm not arguing about the use case, but what I am saying is that like the news that's out, the reason why I bring this up is because one of the things you said is people inside of companies that are deploying artificial intelligence, when it gets deployed poorly, and I saw this too, like they just roll out some new tech and go, okay, everybody here has to use this. And everyone's sitting around going, all I read in the news is everyone's going to get laid off. What are we doing here?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's the reason why we're seeing this sort of lack of impact in a lot of organizations, because if it isn't done strategically and in a way that people feel engaged and taken on that journey, the investment isn't going to pan out. And
do you think part of this is because people are opposed to it? They're just like, I'm not using that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I will use it, but I'm not going to use it so that I can lose my job, kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think that we see that a lot of times, that people are reluctant to take it on, or not feeding, and 100% for, if they're working in an organization that they do not trust or do not feel is going to be working in their best interest, then fair off to them. Like I totally understand the reasons why, but this is why, the reason why we sort of started Ethicai is that without somebody moderating the conversation in a way that's productive, not only for businesses to keep them competitive, particularly inside not-for-profit or inside medium enterprise, if you don't do that, then it's just going to be open slather to large enterprise and everything will just get consumed. So we're trying to create a fighting fit kind of angle to it. But then at the same time also providing individuals and employees to understand what their value is and what skills they need to evolve and lean into in a world that's more AI augmented.
But that's like, those are the two really important pieces. Sorry, I should turn my fingers around. Those are the two really important pieces, right? The sense that you want to be open and honest with your employees. Again, this is part of the ethical side of this. It's like you don't just want to jam this stuff down people's throats. But the flip side of that is that the employees, because this happened to me, like I'm not talking like out of thin air. We automated almost all of the trading that we did when I was at Goldman Sachs. And I knew when I was doing this, because I'm not silly, that I was essentially potentially automating myself out of a job. And I didn't care in a way, because my feeling always was, and maybe I'm just built differently, but my feeling always was, if I automate myself out of a job and I do it effectively and efficiently and I do really well and the business grows and we make more money, I'll get a bigger job.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And if I have this skill, because if the guy next to me, and it was mostly guys, so that's why I'm saying that, but if the guy next to me wasn't willing to buy in, and at Goldman, everybody kind of bought in because it was a unique culture, but if the guy next to me wasn't going to buy in, I was kind of happy, because I was like, I'm learning all this new stuff. You're just sitting there moaning about it, and I'm going to get promoted and you're going to get left behind. How do you, and again, it's a little bit draconian in that way, but how do you convince people that, like, as you said, two things are important. One is the companies have to be really straightforward with their employees. We're not doing this just to fire everybody. But second of all, this is an opportunity for you to get new skills. And if you get new skills, you'll always have some kind of employment, even if it's not here.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we do. This is exactly what we do. Is we shape not only, because I think the missing part of what you're saying there is that you knew that you had the opportunity for the role, the next role up, right?
I felt like it.
Yeah. It will be, there is opportunities inside those spaces where, okay, cool, I learn these skills and I embed them in my practice, and now I've got it part of my toolkit. And I think it's quite fair to think the majority of people are wanting to level up their skill sets in terms of AI, because it is a competitive skill set to have inside the workplace at the moment. But what we do a lot inside organizations, so we've operationalized some MIT research called Epoch, and that research is all around what are the most resilient skill sets inside an individual inside a AI augmented workplace. So when you look at, what those skills are, they're actually deeply human. And so when people are spending a lot of time moving and agitating towards higher tech capability, that's actually something that's getting significantly more devalued as we're seeing Claude Code and, all these tools are able to generate and deliver tech quicker. But this is where it comes down to the strategic business advantage. And if a business hasn't actually articulated what comes after the efficiency gain, then everyone feels at a loss. They don't know what's going to come next because their job will be automated. And but my argument there is that the more businesses that are only looking at the opportunity for efficiency means that they've already lost a race, because there's other organizations that are thinking not only just about an efficiency play, but how AI is fundamentally changing their sector. And the more you kind of have to think in that high level critical thinking, what this is going to mean for a wider audience and what your customer base is looking and expecting, they're things that you really have to kind of consider as part of that strategy. And I think that a lot of people are typically only seeing the efficiency play at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would make the case that even the biggest tech companies in the world, and let's put Facebook off to the side, because I'm not sure they're going to be gigantic winners in the AI race, but I'm pretty sure NVIDIA is.
Yeah.
And Jensen Huang just keeps saying, we just can't hire enough people, and we definitely cannot hire enough engineers, because even if Claude Code is writing the code, it's writing more code than ever before, and somebody has to manage that code, and you can't have people that don't understand
code to do it.
How to write code to be able to do that. So it's never been a better time to be an engineer. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. Well, I was just going to say, and then there's also the second and third order consequences of what does that code then impact inside an ethical realm, right? I do this and this bias is now introduced into the system. What does that mean? And this is where you're seeing a pretty big sort of interest inside philosophical disciplines inside companies like Anthropic and ChatGPT, OpenAI. They're all kind of working towards, kind of taking in what these bigger tier questions are. So it really is going to reshape work, because the type of questions that are being asked are ones that we have to really start thinking beyond just the performance of this current quarter. It's what does our legacy look like inside the wider environment.
Did you see what happened? You know who Eric Schmidt is? He's the former CEO of Google, right? Did you see what happened to him at his commencement speech?
Got booed. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, so I was going to ask you, I can't imagine, I remember when I graduated from college, it was a while ago, but I still do remember it. I can't imagine booing the guy who's giving the commencement speech. Is this a generational thing as well? Do you think that, I don't know what the current, is it Gen Z? I have no idea what it is, right? But do you think Gen Z is more likely to really despise this as opposed to, Gen X or baby boomers?
I think it's an interesting divide, because I think millennials, particularly the younger millennials, are also really angry about what's happening with AI. I think the main thing is that there is a real kind of narrative push around frontier AI models, large language models being the be all and end all of AI. And I think that that's something that, just in terms of literacy and what the best use cases are, we just need to kind of look to address, because as I said, they're just consuming all the media and all the use cases inside that implementation. Am I surprised? No, I think people are really angry at this kind of the current situation of how it's being kind of consumed by a very elite few as part of that process. And when we see something as impactful as AI and what that means, particularly for the next generation who have just graduated, they started when AI wasn't as big as what it is now. They're now going through, and the graduate market has fallen through. Now, whether or not, there's lots of arguments as to whether or not the graduate market has actually fallen through. A lot of companies are saying now that they'll hire only graduates as part of that process. But ultimately, a lot of people are scared, and that narrative is being driven a lot inside media. So something that people are angry about. Now, do I think it was the right avenue for it? Probably not. I don't think it's that impactful in terms of Eric Schmidt, the person that you want to crucify in that situation. But I think that I understand why people are angry about it, and the more people we have talking about the potential of AI to solve bigger problems than just to evacuate roles and create layoffs inside. That's what we need more people talking to.
I agree with you. Okay, Carol, I'm going to let you go. I hope you enjoyed this. This was kind of awesome for me. I feel like we could go on and on this, but I think we've made our points, at least initially. Thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my complete pleasure.
I'll catch you later.
Bye for now. Okay, let's bring in Michael. It looks like we're having a little bit of a technical problem. Oh, Michael, there you are. How are you?
I'm doing good.
It's nice to meet you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay, and it's nice to meet you too.
It's very nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for coming and doing this today. We wanted to have you on the show because we wanted to talk about AI-enabled payment infrastructure, how it can help businesses move money faster, how it works with fraud, and how it can help businesses operate across global financial rails with more just intelligence and more control. And before we get to that in detail, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Wefi.
Yeah, Wefi is mostly, when we talking about Wefi, it's mostly about the community. So we community of the people who believe that the future of the finance is kind of a in between of the standard financial rails and modern infrastructure of decentralization. So with
go ahead.
For example, with the stable coins, you can do much more than with the fiat and local currency. And with all of this payment rails, global payment rails, especially with global accounts, you kind of feel and having much more than in regular banking.
Can you talk about how AI in combination, because this is interesting, right? You're talking about decentralized finance, connecting to traditional finance, but also using artificial intelligence to transform that payment infrastructure. Maybe you can talk about how AI is transforming payment infrastructure in the context of the stable coins that you were just talking about.
Yeah, the initial AI influence, which is coming kind of a like in the early beginning. So when the clients, when the client, for example, let's imagine the client wants to join us for the payment or for having a wallet, for having a card. So the first thing which we should do as a organization is to check the compliance and do the KYC. So and AI is definitely step into this area. For example, a lot of the controls, a lot of the checks is performed much more better with AI tools rather than with manual review. And we believe that being a global organization, it's important that AI make compliance invisible for the good users. For example, if user have no problem with any sort of the compliance checks, then it should be very smooth, very convenient, and very like natural experience. Then it goes to the monitoring, and it goes to the optimization of the cost. And AI also play a very, very important role in this area. I could say that it could potentially remove the unnecessary delays and make the reduction of the fails or declines on the payments and so on and so forth.
You talk about fraud detection as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So when a company tries to move from, let's just say, traditional, which is rules-based fraud detection or prevention actually, and they start implementing AI decisioning, where does it like break down for? In other words, you can't just like roll this thing out and hope it just works automatically. What are some of the challenges about rolling out AI-based fraud decisioning and fraud prevention as opposed to just having it be rules-based?
It's kind of a mix between something you could do manually, and of course there is also a place of fine-tuning the rules, kind of expecting local cases and improving the system at all. But the most challengeable part is that you need to be fast enough to prevent and even detect the fraud. So once it happened, for example, what if I trying to reach the ATM machine with my card,
right?
And I can be recognized like I'm in a foreign country doing some sort of the kind of a fraud patterned transaction,
right?
And how can I prove that it is me? And there is a different solution to do. For example, it could be a call, which could be manually given by the company, and during this call, it's a problem that I could potentially prove that this is me and this is me doing this transaction. But with AI tool, first there are many patterns that I could work with. Second, even during the session of the call, it is possible to recognize my voice, recognize my speech, and
Right.
second, even if navigating through the different transaction gives some kind of a score for AI to understand and recognize that, like, this is me doing such kind of a transaction. So it helps people to feel more secure with the finance, which is very important. So most of the thing we taking care of when it goes to kind of a banking and finance service is that we want to trust. We recognize the trust when someone cares of our security, of kind of a fraud and etc. And this is kind of a very good example when AI plays a very unique and good role in it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can tell you multiple times where I've been away from home and I've tried to use a credit card, which is mine, to affect a financial transaction, and I've been denied. And this is, I mean, it starts back in like 2008, so a long time ago, but even up until today. And it's so frustrating because there's no kind of way to prove you are who you are. And they're like, that's your card and you're right. If artificial intelligence can help us actually fix that, that would just be a huge win, I think, for everybody. How do you and Wefi think about the necessity, right? Because you're talking about this bridge. I think we should talk about it between DeFi, right? Because Wefi is it's an on-chain financial infrastructure company. But how do you think about connecting traditional payment infrastructure with decentralized finance without creating kind of new compliance or trust problems?
Yeah, that's the very good question, because when I, for example, thinking about what if the AI will be available only in the infrastructure of the banks we know, without
Right.
decentralization, without all of this modern thinking. It's not like it's not useful, but it's so much more you can do with all this decentralization, transparency, with all these tools, which, for example, stable coins, blockchain networks giving you, giving AI. So, like, what we believe is that the future, it's in the combination of AI with the blockchain infrastructure, like transparency of the blockchain system, provide the high quality and real-time data that AI can use to make financial transaction faster, more secure, and more adaptive, and like even less fraudulent. That's for example, it's about settlement rails. It's about FX conversion. For example, with your example, if you travel a lot, you don't want to pay more than you should pay, and
For sure.
it's with all of these currencies, different currencies, with your, for example, only one card, it's kind of possible that it's automated. You don't need to take care about the prices, and you still getting the operational efficiency with kind of a global setup. So you spending less and you getting more.
Got it. Okay. Michael, look, I really want to thank you for doing this today. It's kind of a heroic effort on your part. I really, really appreciate it. We should have you back on again. I'd love to dig deeper into Wefi, that connectivity we talked about between the DeFi space and the traditional finance space, and learn more about how blockchain plays a role in this as well. So thank you again very much for coming on and doing the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, and we'll I'm happy to be here, and I will honestly believe that with kind of a modern approach and kind of a global scale of DeFi infrastructure, we can see more and more proofs that AI helping people to make finance more cost effective and more global. So thank you for having me, and
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you.
It was a pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you again. Okay, Martin, let's have Jasper join us. Jasper, how are you? It's nice to meet you. Where are you based? Awesome. I like how you say that. I'm in Singapore. Where else would I be? No worries. Okay, look, Jasper, thank you so much for joining us today. Say again? Where am I? I am in the heart of Bangkok. Okay. It's going to take a second to get you into the frame, but that's not a problem. How long have you been living in Singapore? Oh my God, that's a long time. And where are you coming from? Okay. That's not bad. It's nice. It's colder there, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if I'm still live, but you're still in a waiting room. Yeah, I'm just trying to.
And I see you twice, but
Yep, you see me twice. There you are. Now you're in the main show. Okay. Look, it's great to have you here. It's great to have gotten a little bit of extra information, so it gives me a little bit of context. We wanted to have you come on the show. This is going to be interesting for me, actually, because I haven't had a good conversation on e-commerce in a while. We wanted to figure out like how AI-powered omni-channel e-commerce or commerce operations will help brands scale faster, manage complexity, and make better decisions across Southeast Asia's kind of fragmented digital markets. But maybe before we get to that, tell us a little bit about Intrepid.
All right, very happy to.
Go.
So Intrepid is one of the leading regional e-commerce enabler across Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that we enable brands go to market end to end, so from strategy to execution, full funnel, so from upper funnel content marketing to retail media and omni-channel, all the platforms, so TikTok Shop, marketplaces, brand.com, with everything that is required to do that successfully across Southeast Asia. So we provide a holistic range of technology-enabled services across e-commerce, social commerce, marketing, data and technology solutions, backed by our tech team based in Vietnam and a team of over 1,000 in offices across Southeast Asia.
Got it. And how long have you been working at Intrepid? You said you've been in Singapore for 13 years. You're quite the local there, but how long have you been working on this? Just again, from my context, and then we can dig deeper.
That is, I've had my 7-year anniversary at Intrepid.
Wow. Okay, good for you. Congratulations. Let's talk about this. Where are e-commerce companies, sellers, whatever it is, getting the most real operational leverage from AI? And I want to talk about this, right? Because if you've been there for 7 years, I have to believe that the way that you look at what I call e-commerce facilitation, you call it enablement, it's fine with, we can use whatever terminology you want. But when you think about how just the technology itself has changed in the last 7 years, and frankly, in the last 2 years, more than that, where do you think that e-commerce players are getting more leverage from it? And what had to change at Intrepid to kind of facilitate that as well, right? Because you're just sitting there 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. And I won't say it's like status quo because there's a lot of stuff to do, but it's not like the big change that we're seeing today where it's agentic AI, agentic payments, generative AI. Like there are so many ways you can use artificial intelligence. Where's most of the leverage coming from, and what had to change at Intrepid to make this actually really effective? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. So obviously, I think AI in general is already everywhere in the ecosystem. We see the platforms removing friction by adopting more and more AI tools, personalization, automated advertising types, etc. And also on our side, I think it's pretty much everywhere. If you look at, we create a lot of content for our brands, whether that is video, whether that is live streaming, whether that is all the content that you would typically see in the brand official stores on the leading marketplaces in the region. Obviously, the tools that we use to do that have been shaped by generative AI in the last couple of years. Customer service is an area, but I think characterizing the biggest bang for your buck and where we see the biggest impact is just operational leverage. How can we leverage AI to automate manual repetitive tasks to free up significant amounts of time so our team can focus on higher value added services or activities, which our clients keep raising the bar as well. So our team is also expected to deliver more value in terms of strategic recommendations, insights, etc. And this definitely enables that.
So can you talk about how, right, so I understand this operational leverage. It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I see that across the spectrum in different verticals as well. Where in sort of the e-commerce value chain is that operational leverage actually playing itself out? And what are the things that your clients are focusing on when they say, we need to have this thing done in this space and we need to have artificial intelligence do it for us so we can be better at our business?
I think there's no specific ask. We need AI in a particular domain. If anything, I would argue that the technology is ahead of the market in terms of consumer and client adoption.
Okay.
So maybe I'll give you 2 examples
Please.
on that. If you look at AI live streaming, not yet allowed on TikTok, only allowed on Shopee. If you look at AI video generation, technologically perfectly possible, but in terms of brand approval, brand adoption, lagging versus the state of technology, right?
Yeah. So why would AI live streaming not be available on any particular platform? Is it just because there's a lack of control? Do you know what I mean? Or a lack of guide? Like what are the platform against here?
I think for TikTok as a platform, it's all about human connection, human hosts, human creators, human influencers, human hosts interacting with viewers. And I think that's their view on the core differentiator. And obviously, AI takes part of that human connection away. And I think that's something that will take time for the market and the platform to embrace.
So is this when you're talking about platforms, do you mind if I name a couple of platforms? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
So when you're talking about platforms, you're talking about Shopee, you're talking about Lazada, you're talking about platforms like that, yeah?
Correct.
But are there cases where individual companies, I don't know, like Nike's always in my head. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I just use Nike, and I'm sorry if that's not one of your clients, but it could be any kind of sportswear or sports kind of selling company. It's just the thing that I think about because I do that a lot. They have their own site as well, their own sort of e-commerce site as well. is the operational leverage being filtered down to both the marketplaces and the way they interact with the marketplace, which is kind of cool, but also their own online store as well? Both of those things happening?
So I think this differs, right? If you look at it from a execution on a particular platform, on a marketplace,
Yep.
that's where all our processes, all our systems, all our capabilities are optimized, and that's where we have a lot of track record and experience.
Okay.
We're specialized in that across many brands and across all categories. So
Got it.
that's where, from a service perspective, I would say we have more operating leverage. If you look at it from a brand.com, either that is a local development catered to the specific requirements of Southeast Asia, so we develop those for our clients. In that case, obviously, we can extend our coverage over that platform. In terms of execution, if you look at the other variant, a brand.com can be a global rollout, a global platform.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it very much follows the brand's own internal processes, systems, constraints. And actually, I often tell brands, in that case, it does not make sense to have us manage that channel for you. But I think the interesting thing which is happening in Southeast Asia today is that before you had marketplaces, and like in China, marketplaces pretty much replaced the brand.com. That was where the traffic is. That was where the consumers are, and that's where the brands wanted to be. I think with the rise of TikTok, you see a more distinct role of different channels in the market. So TikTok is becoming more exploration, new user acquisition. The marketplaces are more search and purchase intent. And that creates a space for your brand.com for loyalty, for your most loyal fans, your most diehard fans, etc. So I think harnessing that omni-channel play, and particularly with TikTok being more of a full funnel platform, how do you manage that full funnel across those different touch points? That is, I think, where a company like us excels.
And what role does Instagram play, if you don't mind me asking? Because again, Instagram to me feels just categorically more like TikTok than it does like Lazada or Shopee. But I see a lot of my friends doing lots of shopping on Instagram as well.
That's interesting. In terms of the shopping on, I think from a checkout and from a share of sales perspective, for us, at least in Southeast Asia, we see it more as one of the upper funnel platforms, and where a lot of the D2C brands are very active and very successful, like on other Meta Group platforms. But typically, for the main brands in terms of their direct sales funnel, it is not as significant compared to the other channels that I mentioned.
Got it. Yeah, sorry, I should have been more specific about this. It's very, very D2C, very, very direct to consumer. How does AI, because if you're operating on omni-channel, right, then you're going to have, if you're doing this manually, you're going to have inventory issues is the wrong word, but it's going to be very difficult to manage your inventory in the sense that you're never really sure when a sale takes place sort of in real time. But how does AI help leverage that so that it can sort of pay attention to your overall inventory, but then the inventory that you're placing and selling across different platforms? How is AI helping there as well?
I think that's an area where Southeast Asia, because of its fragmentation and because of the nature of the platforms, where there's a lot of actors on every individual platform, I would say that the machine learning aspect, whether that is demand forecasting, whether that is predictive analytics to optimize margins, or let's say price elasticity, are proven to be. It's one of the areas that most people think of first, like, oh, let's crack that with AI. In reality, though, even the platforms struggle to get statistically significant results in that area.
Really? So you mentioned this word fragmentation a lot, right? What kind of challenges does that and I know, like, it's true, like what's happening in Indonesia is not exactly the same thing that's happening in Thailand. And as we said, like, there's Instagram, there's Shopee, there's Lazada, there is, individual sellers across all those platforms, plus there's Instagram. Like, it's very, very fragmented, particularly in my experience from an e-commerce perspective. What kind of challenges does that bring up, particularly when you're implementing new technology across all of these omni-channel and multiple platforms?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, fragmentation is massive in Southeast Asia. But I think two things to add. One, it's not static fragmentation. All
Yeah.
these platforms keep evolving. So whatever you build will change in the next month or the next quarter. So you need to be continuously evolving to make sure that you're ahead of that. And I think if I look at what makes AI successful or not in general, you can think of a lot of fancy things to do with AI, but ultimately it's about how you integrate that with your processes, how you integrate humans, workflows, AI in the rest of your technology, etc. Right? So you need to fix the basics first. You need to get your data infrastructure in order. You need to get your knowledge, your processes, your SOPs in order, and then you can start to build AI functionalities on top. And to do that at the fragmentation that we see in Southeast Asia, and to keep updating that with the changes in the ecosystem, plus the speed of innovation on the AI front, I think requires a fairly material effort.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to ask you next, right? The iterations in what's happening just in the technology that's driving artificial intelligence is happening so fast. But you also mentioned that the platforms themselves are iterating relatively quickly. How do they keep up? How do you keep up? And what are the platforms focused on when they're thinking about, because you said like they're constantly iterating. What are they focused on when they're focused on these iterations? And then again, what role does the technology play in how they decide what to iterate on?
Yeah. Obviously, they do not tell us everything.
Sure.
But if we observe what we see happening in Southeast Asia and in other parts of the world, I think the platforms are focusing on the key metrics that make sense for them, whether that is conversion rate or how much money they make per time spent on the platform, how frequently people come back, etc., how much money people spend on advertising. So a lot of solutions and a lot of innovation effort will go to optimizing for those objectives, which can either be optimizing through personalization, through different tweaks on the consumer side, or to remove friction on the seller side. So I think, for example, AI or automated ad types are a good example of that, where you see it's gone from, let's say, hey, you have these tools much like Meta, etc., where you can deploy your ad budget on the platforms, and that is now evolving towards put your budget here and let our algorithms do its thing, which removes friction for a vast majority of smaller sellers. But in terms of returns and customization, or ROAS, I should say, and customization opportunities or features for the most sophisticated sellers, that's actually not delivering the same value as the previous way of working, I would say.
How has AI or the implementation of AI changed consumer expectations about how these platforms should serve them?
Well, I think friction is a key point. And if you look at the marketplaces, search is a key interface. And with AI, obviously people get used to a different way of searching, right? Even your Google search returns different results these days, where you have an AI summary and then the listing. So I would expect that as the more, let's say, chat interface based AI giants adopt more shopping in their funnels, whether that is an advertising model or more integrated models, which will differ per geography. I think you will see the e-commerce platforms, let's say, adding that chat-like AI interface and basically having their search and their user interaction following just what I think is ultimately a UI trend in the market.
Do you think that, because you make a really good point, do you think that this is another avenue for expansion for the big foundational AI and frontier AI companies to embed their technology for search, right, into some of the big platforms so that they don't lose the connectivity with the customer? Because even for me, it's taken me a while, but right now, like when I search for something, I generally search inside of my frontier model because I just feel like it gives me better results. and then I'll go to the place where it tells me to go to kind of get the thing that I want to get, whether it's shopping or information or something like that, so I can see like the full information. But is that another way that the platforms can actually continue to remain directly relevant to their customers by embedding like ChatGPT or Anthropic into their experience, as opposed to trying to build that stuff themselves and having people go externally first and then come back in?
I think if you look at a lot of the e-commerce platforms, they either have a parent company which is creating AI models as
So
such.
Alibaba per se, yeah, for Lazada,
It's
yeah.
everyone. It's Alibaba. It's ByteDance. It's so I think from that perspective,
Got it.
I don't think that's a part of the core business that they would look to partner with a third-party platform.
Okay. Tell me, what do you think the future of omnichannel looks like 3 to 5 years out? And what impact do you think that the technology is going to have on it as well? And are we going to get to a point where e-commerce, you think, is 50% of retail? Are we heading in that direction?
To start off with the latter, yes, definitely. I know in China, some of the brands are operating at 70, 80% plus e-commerce in categories which would not always be intuitive for that. So 50% is a safe bet, if you ask me. How will omnichannel evolve? I think attribution across channels will have to evolve, and from an enablement perspective, I think our industry will shift from managing this omnichannel go-to-market for brands to building, training, and managing the AI tools that do that for us. That's how I would expect the evolution to look like. How that evolves, whether that is a small language model per brand, whether those are siloed small language models focused on specific parts of the value chain, that remains to be seen, but I think this is the direction of travel.
Okay, one more thing and then I'll let you go. What role do you think agentic payments is going to play going forward, if at all?
It's an interesting one where I think originally OpenAI, for example, intended to have the payment gateway native to their platform, but they've since reversed that and now seem to be heading towards more of a Google Shopping advertising model.
Yeah.
I think agentic payments from a consumer perspective. Yeah, why not? I mean, in a sense, right? It's the logical extension of a PayPal. You're already known on this laptop, so you don't need to enter anything. Just click once and go, right?
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I have my own views on agentic payments. I mean, for me, it's like my credit card is already at all the places where I normally shop online, and I don't need another layer on top of it.
Exactly.
But I guess if you're new to this, right, and you're just like setting new stuff up, I don't know, maybe some people will use it, but I'm not a big believer. Okay, look, this was super great. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your insights on this, Jasper. I really appreciate your time today. It'd be great to have you back. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of the show.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye for now. Okay, that's it today for ATP Insights. Thank you to all of the guests for joining us, and thank you to all the people that watched and listened with us live. We really appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. And please be sure on the shorts, on the full videos, on all of our socials to leave us comments, and ask us questions. We'd love to be able to answer those questions directly, AMA style or any style you want. My name is Michael Waits. Bye for now.